there's one thing that's helped me improve at graphic design, it's getting feedback. So today, to help others in the same way, I'll be reacting to your best thumbnails. This was an event that was hosted in my Discord server. The event was only open for 5 hours, but we have 58 thumbnails to react to. For each one, I'll give my initial impressions, any tips I have to improve it, and then end with a rating out of 10. So the first one is by Ferret MC, and I've actually seen a lot of his thumbnails. I believe what he does is he uses Blender for the players, and then he uses RTX screenshots for the background. Now the colors look pretty good, but the main problem is that the players and the backgrounds don't really match each other very well. They're at very different angles. Now, he's not showing the feet of the player, so it's not as important for the players to be situated in the backgrounds, but it still would help a lot if they were more connected. The players themselves are also quite flat. They could use a bit more shading and highlights to elevate them from the background and make them stand out. I'd also avoid having players directly front on, like opposite here, because it makes them look 2D, and it'd be much better if you had them rotated on, like towards the center a bit. The text itself is a little bit close to the edge. I'd move it down a bit. He could also use different colors for the text, not just white, to make them stand out more. Different text stylings as well, not just a drop shadow, things like that. But overall, I think the concept's pretty basic. It works pretty well. Good job. Now we have one by It's Firecraft. And just the first thing I noticed is that the players themselves are very low resolution. The scene itself looks actually really cool. I like the way he's posed the players, and it looks very dramatic. But they're a little bit small, and they blend in quite a lot with the background. So you can see this player here is a very dark skin, and then the background is also very dark. So it kind of blends in, and you don't really even notice him at first glance. The red skin stands out, but again, it's very blurry and quite small. The background he's used here, this kind of textured black overlay, it doesn't really make sense to use a background like this, because this is a Skywars map, so you'd expect to see a sky there normally. If you wanted to give it that kind of stormy atmosphere, I'd make it a stormy kind of raining kind of atmosphere, but still have clouds and a sky there. The text, I don't really know how the text doesn't appear to connect to the scene at all in any way. The TV off, so that might be better, something better conveyed in the title. But I love the concept here. I think it would help if you just zoomed in a bit on the players for the composition. Make sure the players are at a good resolution, and you can also add additional light, and depending on the atmosphere you choose. So if you choose a stormy atmosphere, I would adjust the light and colors of the environment and the players to match that. Next up is one by Bleep, and this is a pack thumbnail, I believe. This is unlike a lot of pack thumbnails, it doesn't really have any background. It's basically just a layout of the packs and then a player. The player itself, the pose doesn't really make sense to me. I think they're meant to be flying, but it looks very stiff to me. The way the arms are kind of, it's like they're swimming almost. But if they're jumping or flying, I think the legs would normally be much more straight, and the arms probably too. I can show another example I have on screen of a flying pose that I've done. But you just want to give the character, give the pose more momentum and make it look like they're leaping forward. This is a bit stiff. The pack folder UI thing, that works okay. The pixelated effect is a bit loud, I think, and it kind of distracts. It's a bit strong. And then I think in this case, the background could use a bit more atmosphere to it. And if it's PvP oriented, he should probably be holding a sword. Also, it looks like there's this, I believe he used Nomad Sculpt to render this, and whenever you see these lines here, this is an artifact of the ambient occlusion post-processing effect. So in order to remove this, you would have to disable the ambient occlusion, or it depends on your device and your settings, the resolution of those shadows. Usually it only happens if you have a very large map though, or a huge model. It doesn't only happen for players, at least not for me. Next up, we have a pack thumbnail by Cursed Zot. This looks pretty good at first glance. I like the colors, I like the lighting. I noticed immediately that the lighting on the players fits quite well with the background. You can see it has this very warm yellowish tint to it, but then also this green theme. I think he shows a good background, a good map for it. The perspective of the player lines up pretty well. The UI is rotated a bit too much to the left, I feel like, but it does seem to line up with the blocks here, so that works okay. Maybe it probably just needs a bit more perspective. Make the increase the strength of the perspective, because if you look at like these posts over here, that would extend on a much more either horizontal or even tilted in the other direction. So you may have just used like an FOV that was too low for the players and UI. But the editing here is quite nice. He has this inner glow effect around everything, which brings it forward and helps it stand out. And then also these line highlights, which I like doing. One thing I would suggest is not blur the background quite as much, just a bit less. Like maybe if this is 10%, maybe try 5% instead. But yeah, I really like this one. Now we're won by Red Blue. And it looks like this is his video about the history of the Hive Hub, or the Hive Castle, I believe. This one is going for a simple but bold concept, I feel like. You have the castle here in the center, and then you have the text big and bold in the background. This one worked, the composition of this one works okay, and I think the history complements well with the castle itself. I'm just thinking though, if there is history included in the title, you might want to what you could show instead is maybe the Hive Castle today in 2025, and then what it looked like back in 2020 or something, or 2021. You could show that before and after with a side-by-side panel comparison. But that's just another idea. That would really sell that effect, the change over time. Okay, now we have something from Ragib. Now this, what I'm noticing just initially is the player is very dark. The shadow on the text and its whole style of the text is not very appealing. It's quite blurry. Like the shadow is very blurry and broad. The inner glow is very saturated, and the font probably isn't the best font to use. But it looks like a texture pack review. I do like the clouds, actually. They match with the blocks, which is sometimes you don't see that. So that's nice. But yeah, I would just brighten up the player a lot. Make sure you have a clear direction for the light. In this case, you probably want to come in from the right side. And make sure you shade the player like that. And yeah, change the text style, and so choose a different font. If you're not sure about fonts, usually it's just safest to go with a Minecraft font. So like Minecraft 10, Minecraft 5, Minecraft, the regular Minecraft font, something like that. Okay, now this is one by Fundam. And this looks pretty cool at first glance. I like the composition where you have this player reaching forward and a trophy. It looks like it's for a challenge. I will say that this vertical blur that's on the text is very distracting. I don't really think it adds anything. I think it's meant to be like some kind of shine, but I think it'd be better without that. Maybe just a general glow would help from behind the text, but not that kind of overlay. I like the way the items are all flowing out of the center. They're all pointing towards the center. There's a clear focal point. That's great. The beveled effect on the skin itself and some of the things in the background, that's a stylistic choice. I normally don't do it because I feel like it makes it look too detailed almost. It takes away from the simplicity. If you do it though, just make sure to be consistent. So I would also put it on the swords and maybe make it less strong, and make sure that the highlights and the darks aren't just brighter and darker, but they actually shift in the hue. So the highlights, make sure they get warmer, and make sure the shadows get cooler, depending on your atmosphere. Now this is one by Pengu. I hope I'm saying that correctly, and I like this one a lot. you can see it's for a texture pack release. And what I like about this one a lot is that it's much more unique than most texture pack release thumbnails. Usually you'd see the UI and then a player next to it, and that's it. But this one takes a complete different concept, and I think it works quite well. So you have the player here. It doesn't show the armor a lot. Maybe if the player was also wearing a helmet, that would showcase the armor more. But the items are up here, and then you can also see the blocks are in the background. One thing that's a bit weird is the blocks are on like this angle, but the player looks like it's kind of front on. But maybe they could be more like centered and then lean back a bit with a bit of perspective. The items themselves and even the player, they have this nice highlight on them. And it looks like there's like this beam of light coming out from the center. The bow does get a bit lost here in the color. It looks like it's actually behind the glow effect, but the rest of the items are in front. So maybe bring that in front of the glow effect would help. Normally what I do when I'm having a beam of light like this, or like a sun ray, or a spotlight, is I have one layer that's behind the objects, and then I have another layer that's more transparent that's in front of the objects. So you can see it adds kind of a bit of depth, so that there's a denser light because there's more of it behind the object, but then there's also a bit in front. But overall, I think this is a really great thumbnail. I love the unique concept, and the colors and everything work very well. This is one by Nuvo, and there's not much really to say here because this background's from my tutorial, I think. It looks like he recreated it though, because this isn't the same one from my tutorial, so that's great. He did a good job at recreating that. And then the player itself, it's pretty well edited. It's a little bit low quality. The shadow, I would not make the shadow go across the body and the arm like that, because what's really going to happen is it'll be much higher up on the arm because it's more forward. But yeah, I'd probably just remove the shadow on the arm completely. And the player shadow, I like what he did here. He did this cool thing that I do sometimes where you add make the shadow get darker where it's next to the feet or whatever part of the player is touching the ground. And that just adds like a nice ambient occlusion effect, or darkening of the corners that are touching. As well as the line highlight, you could add a bit of inner glow. It looks like you might have a bit here, but you could add like some on the arm as well. This is one by Alcuro, I think it's how you say it. And it looks like a montage thumbnail. So it's it looks like a normal screenshot, first person screenshot that's of someone comboing someone, and then they've added this sword in post. Everything here is a bit low quality. It doesn't look like you've done much color correction to it. And the text, that style, I would not normally use that style for montage, or at least not without more effects, because it's very loud, but so it distracts from the player, and also the font and styling just doesn't match very well. If you do want to go for a simpler montage style of thumbnail, which I have seen some good examples of, I would focus on the details, make sure that the composition is very clean with good colors. For example, here the player is much too close to the top and the sword's being cut off. And focus on, if you're not using shaders or anything, just try to enhance the colors of the environment and background. Now we have one by Shorky, and this looks like Olympics in Minecraft or challenges. So this is survival games, and then a bunch of doors over here. This is a classic example of like a split panel thumbnail where you have two different sides showing different things, different examples of what's going on in the video. And this works pretty well. I don't know, it might just be low resolution because of the export, because the assets, everything looks low resolution a bit, but yeah, he's added saturation to the background to make it stand out more. The sky works well. There's a lot of doors here. The doors over here are 2D, whereas these are 3D, but I guess that's, if you want to, I think the player's a model here though, because I don't think you'd be able to get that pose without modeling in it. So yeah, just making the doors a 3D item in his hand would help. This is a simple style of thumbnail that, and a lot of people do this where I can see how you might not want to add too much more detail to it, like with fancy highlights or inner glow. But for this style of thumbnail, I think it works pretty well. You could just improve the composition a bit by maybe having this person standing next to a survival crate on the ground so that they can both be much bigger. And over here, just not have these doors be cut off here, but have them more towards the center. Maybe if he was reaching higher. And you could also have a background on both sides if you're just to be consistent. This is one by Swift FX, and this is cool because it has the kind of bend and pose of Minecraft players, which I don't use, but it always is cool to see when people do that because I know it must take a while for it to pose players with a full rig like that. There's a lot of watermarks here, I think, but I believe the text the main text is this trap text, and then you have the scene here. It's like a very high saturation style thumbnail, which is a style. There are things that you can improve, like the value of the text. The brightness and darkness is very close to the background, so it doesn't really stand out much. You could add an outline maybe, or a box to put it in. That would help. This person looks quite stiff compared to these people, and you could be looking a bit more towards them. That would help. Now we have Solid. Solid does a lot of thumbnails in this style with kind of the NPC mod, and then a lot of color correction and overlays and lighting. I think this is a good example where the subjects, such as the players, this player in particular, and then these players over here, are much more saturated than the background, and that makes them stand out a lot more. He also has good focal blur here, where the background that's close to the players in the foreground isn't blurred, or at least not blurred as much, but then it gets more blurred the further away it gets. The main thing here is I would say that the text, the perspective warp on the text looks a bit strange because it doesn't match the perspective of the blocks in the environment, for example. It would be going much more down this way if it was. Sometimes it's too extreme to line up with that, but I think that would look much better if you kind of reversed this perspective, at least vertically. And also the motion blur, it just looks a bit strong to me. I think you could reduce the transparency on that. But I really like this one overall. This is if I remember correct, I don't think this is actually by Momo. I think this one was made by Meili. But I'll still give feedback on it. This one I like. It's got good composition. It's got the player here on the left, and then the bed on the right. So it's showing this person playing the new Bed Wars Season 2. One thing that's happened a bit with the lighting on this one is the colors have been washed out a lot because the background itself is very dark, but then there have been these light overlays added on top, and that if you don't adjust the underlying colors of the background, that can wash out the colors a lot because you lose the contrast and it just gets brighter overall. So what I would recommend doing is making a selection on the background where the parts that are brighter, that are being lit up, and actually adjust the colors and make them brighter themselves. This one is by Pink Pig, and it looks like another montage one. So a couple things to note here. First of all, when you're going for a background that's kind of this textured overlay kind of background without many blocks or anything else involved, and it's kind of like you're just immersed in the atmosphere of the air and the particles in it, you want to add some kind of gradient or vignette or something that gives it so it's not just uniform, but it has some kind of focus to it. So the center should be much brighter and draw your attention to it, and the edges should kind of just fade away. Also, the pose of the player, you want to always make sure you alternate the direction the arms and the legs are going in. So if the right arm is going forward, then the left arm should be going back, and vice versa with the left and right arm and leg. Then the direction, it looks like this was done with an NPC mod and shaders, but you want to make sure that the direction of the light is, you usually always want it to be on the front of the player, so kind of reverse what you have here, make it come from this direction and then make this side darker, and then you probably want to do some manual shading just to make those faces a bit more dark, to make that the shape of the player stand out more. The text itself, it blends in with the background a lot. It's a very similar color, so you want to choose colors that bring it out from the background, but complement the background without blending it too much or clashing with it. The font, I'd also recommend using a different font, something that was cleaner, had less curves to it. And normally you don't want as many overlays, or at least you don't want the same kind of overlays on the text as the background, because that makes it kind of like fade in with the background. So you want to usually put the overlays behind the text and then have separate overlays if you're going to apply them to the text. You can also make it 3D instead of using this kind of drop shadow effect. Okay, this is a pack thumbnail by Bolt Blade. This looks like a really good pack, actually. I don't think I've seen this one before. And it looks like they did it in Nomad Sculpt based on these lines here. So just overall, I'd say that everything is a bit overexposed. The brights are too bright. It may just be the pack is also very contrasty, because the black textures are also quite dark. But if you can do color correction so that that's just a bit more subtle and you can see those colors better, that would help a lot. Also make sure that the light is coming from the front in this case, so the left side you want it to be coming from, to make this side of the player much darker. The rotation of the UI, I think you want it to be a little bit more following the direction of the block, so rotate it to the right a bit more. The pose of the player itself, it's a bit weird how most of it looks like a regular Minecraft walking pose, but then the right arm is kind of brought down and into the body a bit. I kind of like that, but I think you should make the rest of the limbs a bit more dynamic like that too. Remember, whenever you're doing a pose, you want to make it consistent so that it follows the same kind of style. The background looks like it was also done in Nomad. Nomad backgrounds are a bit harder to get looking clean. I would normally just focus on using gradients and colors to have that fade into the distance a lot. So you could like blur the background a bit here, add a bit of fog, things like that. And then the background's already quite bright, but you could make the direction the light's coming from even brighter. I have a pack thumbnail tutorial that shows how to do all of this. This looks like a pack folder by SwimMC. And here it looks like the player was either like a screenshot from a Bedrock NPC mod, or maybe in Blockbench. So there's not much shading on the player, and they didn't add much manually. It doesn't look like. The main thing here is I think the use of overlays is the main thing that could be improved. It looks like the overlays are just images that have reduced transparency. That goes for this like ring of fire here, and then these overlays in the background. You want to make sure that you're using a blend mode whenever you use an overlay. So like for overlays, normally like these, I'd normally use color dodge or just the overlay one, something like that. And then if you're using light, things that are meant to be glowing or bright, then something like add or screen. Okay, this one is by Gray Carpet, and it looks like an interesting composition here. It looks like a fight between two controller players, Anonymous and Wanna Pizza. Maybe this anonymous person is a mystery player that they don't know yet. The composition, so just focus on the composition as a whole. I think it'd be better, since this player is fallen, for the camera to be looking down a bit more, so there's less like empty dead space up here in the right corner. So you can see more of that, the depth that the player is fallen into. That would emphasize the height, I think, a bit. And just on the editing and color of the thumbnail, it's very much a kind of uniform, saturated, bright red. I think you want to add a bit of variation to that and make it not quite this uniform. This is basically pure red here. So you want to make it like slightly off red and less saturated color. And it can get really bright and saturated in some places, like on the player highlights. But you don't want it to be everywhere like that, because it distracts from the focus here. This is one by Dead for Real, and this looks interesting. So we have a plane crash here, and then these players. So it looks like they got stranded on an island, and they're trying to survive now. So I could get that pretty quickly from the thumbnail. So that's good that it's that it's conveying that idea. In terms of the editing, the size and position and angle of the players doesn't except for this guy. This guy kind of works, but the rest look very much out of place with the background screenshot. Like this guy looks like he's in the floor, much smaller. These ones are tilted much too far forward. And then this white outer glow on the players. I would pretty much never use something like that unless like they're glowing. But in that case, you definitely use a blend mode like add. And then yeah, the players are just quite small, and so you'd want to make them. The background, you'd also want to be the screenshot. You'd want to be taken from a much lower angle, so that you could get the players up close while seeing their whole bodies, kind of looking up towards that. Like they could all be walking out of this crash site together, or panicking like they are in this case. And then I don't know what this mace is here for. It doesn't really seem to fit the, but I don't know the title. So if it did have a place, then it's kind of a bit weird floating in the air, especially if it's this this kind of environment. But if you do want to include that, I think you got to integrate it somehow more. This thumbnail is by NotCube, and it looks pretty simple. We just have a player here on the left, and then text that says "Hey." The background is just a solid color. You could desaturate that a bit, and then except for some cases where you want to go with a really simple style, generally I think you should avoid using solid colors, especially if you're doing more with the player like you are here. And this inner glow on the player, it's good that you have that from the text. That's something that's really good to add, is whenever you have glow in text or something, to have that color of the light reflected on the player is great. But I think it looks like there's no blend mode on this, so it should be on something like add, so that it looks more like light. Then it looks like there's these shadows, but they look like they're more like lines here. So if you want to make the shadows look more realistic and natural, then you probably need to like cut out each of the faces individually, and then use like a mask to differentially shade each part. Now we have one by Luxified YT, and it looks like an exposed in thumbnail. This is kind of similar to that Stranded Island one before, where we have a very unedited player in the foreground, the exposed text, and then this the background of the YouTube page. So again, I would avoid using the white blurred glow like this. In this case, you might want to use some kind of outer glow like that, but you definitely want to give it some kind of color, like red, and then give it a blend mode to make it look more like light. The exposed text is, it's okay, but I definitely think it could be improved a lot. And the background, the chromatic aberration on the background is, it kind of hurts your eyes when you just use it by default. So if you're using, I would avoid using chromatic aberration, except in certain cases, because it kind of just makes it look blurry. You could add some kind of overlay or something on it to make it look more glitched, I suppose. This thumbnail is by Vortex, and it looks like a mobile player training this game 79. Just generally the controls are a bit fuzzy, a bit blurry, and the player doesn't quite fit in with the background. He's actually very large compared to the blocks, and kind of tilted. I think the angle of the player is better than the angle of the background, so I would take a different background screenshot that was more kind of from this low angle. But the background itself looks like it's pretty well edited. It gets a bit dark over here, and the fog's a bit strong here. You can also blur the islands in the background, same with the clouds. But I think the player's a bit too far to the right too, so make sure they're centered to give it good composition. But the concept there is good, and I think you're on the right path, the right track there. Now this thumbnail is by Realm FX, and it looks very good. So you have, this is kind of a very classic style of thumbnail where you have a player, the main character, in the foreground. In this case, he's hide behind a wall, and then you have these 3 players on the right side that are hunting him. But you can see the main focus is, well, he kind of blends in this case, but it's a very good example of the rule of thirds, where you have kind of this third with 1 player, and then this third with 3 smaller players. But the two main subjects are this player and then the 3 players that are hunting him. The red fog adds this really nice glow effect behind the players, and that really helps them to stand out. They also have this really strong shadow, which gives them very good form. I would say the shadow looks a bit too dark, and you might want to give them a bit of inner glow behind where the red fog or the red light is coming from, like kind of on the corner of this guy's head. But if it's coming from behind, it should probably have some kind of glow reflection on the back of the players themselves. But overall, this thumbnail has very good composition, very good colors, and it will stand out. It'll definitely stand out on your homepage. This is a live thumbnail by CBEXE. And this one is pretty basic because you just have what looks like a Java NPC mod screenshot here of the player, and then this light button pasted on here. The main thing I'll say here is that the lighting on the player is much more yellow. It looks like almost like it's at sunset, whereas the background is a very bright blue day sky. At the very least, you want to make sure that lighting and time of day is matching on the player with the background. And you can also add some additional color adjustments to the live button, gradients, light and glow to make it fit in more too. This is a very unique thumbnail by Enchanted Mace, and yeah, this one has top points of originality because it's a kind of 2D pixel art style. It looks more like a 2D video game than a thumbnail. The text, I'll just say, like with the text, the drop shadow is a bit too deep, and it makes it hard to read, particularly the mace part here. If this was going to be a thumbnail, and you want if it was like a thumbnail of a 2D game like this, you'd want to make sure that the player was much larger, and kind of just zoomed in more on one specific part of the scene. And then you might not need the text at all. It doesn't really add much here because you can already see the mace and the environment. But yeah, that's very unique. This is a thumbnail by Pro Arc Gaming, and it looks pretty basic. You just have a shader screenshot here, a player posed here, and then the text is not a font I normally use for a Minecraft thumbnail. It's kind of like this comic book style, but I guess it depends on what kind of content you're making. But just make sure that if you're going with a style like this, that every aspect of it matches, and the player doesn't, and the text doesn't really match with the background, because the background is done with shaders, so it has much more light and better colors. So if the player is kind of a default shading and lighting here. So you want to either edit that to make that match, or make your background simpler so it matches with the player. And also the position of everything. The player is a bit small, and the text is quite large and off-centered vertically. So you might want to make it smaller, change the alignment maybe to make it fit better into the space, so there's not so much empty space down here. This looks like a very cool render by Laik, and this one, I actually gave feedback on this earlier today, and I really like the dual colors and lights they have here. They've got this cyan color coming from the top left-hand corner, and then this kind of purpley red color coming from the bottom hand right. And that adds a nice backlight to the primary lights, this cool cyan tone, and then there's this purplish backlight. That's great. I think you could add a highlight on this leg as well, because it's in the same direction, assuming the light's coming from the front. You can also add a bit stronger inner glow on the legs so they are more defined. That would help them stand out more with the background. Like I was saying before, with backgrounds like this that are very atmospheric, you can add more of a gradient so it's less uniform. You could add, like let's say if the most light's coming from this corner, you could add a kind of a glow gradient in this corner, and then maybe a small one in this corner, or make the center. If he's in an area of denser atmosphere, you could make the center brighter. Now we have one by Alice Bani, and it looks like a pretty simple one where you have a split panel one again, player on the left hand side and then another player on the right side. So first of all, the text is on the bottom, and this you generally want to avoid doing because this text is going to be covered up by the timestamp here, and you're just going to notice it less with the red progress bar if you're previously watching this. So normally you want the text to be at the top if you can, whenever possible. And because these backgrounds are slightly off in perspective, that looks a bit weird. So you should try to do it from a similar angle on both these scenes. This looks like a cinematic photograph by Arton, and looks like it's done with shaders. It has very nice ambience, and I like the color correction here. It's got this very warm light from like sunset or sunrise, or that late time in the evening, and then that you could say reflected on all the surfaces, and then also this really nice depth of field effect with the house in the background. And the composition is really good too. You can see that the player is over here on the left, but centered vertically, and then there's this space he's looking out into on the right side. I really like this. Has very nice ambience to it. This is by George. It's not really a thumbnail, but more like a scoreboard. It's hard to see the background here, but I think this was a vanilla screenshot that he edited. But he did a good job with the light in here. And then I think I did the text, and then these player profile pictures. But for a scoreboard, it works pretty well. I think the space might be a bit different between these, so you might want to use a snap and grid to make sure that those stay aligned. I don't think I've ever seen this person before, but this thumbnail looks very cool. So it's one thing I do notice initially is that it looks like the players have fairly flat shading, and then on the edge highlights they've added this very strong glow, which I like. I see that in a lot of thumbnails, and I think it's great. But it doesn't really match with the or I think they could have done additional shading on the rest of the players to make them fit into the environmental lighting more. So adjust the colors to be more reddish, especially on the edges. So add inner glow and things, like on this shoulder here. There should be a bit of inner glow around these bodies. And also just manual shading. This side of the arm could be darker or brighter just to make it contrast with the other side. The composition is good though. You've got the central player and then the two other players on either side. Everything is laid out well, I think. This one is by Nova Vibe. They didn't make the background here, so it's just a player. And the main thing with the player is you want to make sure the perspective matches with the background. If you're doing this in Blockbench, I made a video about how to make sure that those are lined up. And then the same thing with shadow, you want it to fit with the perspective of the background. And then the player itself, these dark skins are very hard to make look good because all their faces kind of blend together. So usually you have to do manual shading if you really want to make them look good and have each of those have it look like it has proper shading on each side. This is a very cool thumbnail by Blue, and I feel like this is really unique. I think this is almost from an anime or something. because you have this player over here holding this with this giant energy ball, it looks like, and then this player down here. I love the perspective on this. I think it's really cool how you're looking up from a very low angle behind this or beneath this player, and then their focus, their direction is pointing you towards this player, and this person is looking directly at this player. So it has very good it directs your eyes very well. So I love the composition on this one. The player might be a bit small to be able to see on a thumbnail on a tiny page, so you might want to zoom in a bit on him, but it does make it definitely seem more extreme. Also, you can just like add a bit of inner glow on the rest of the player if you want to, maybe some edge highlights. This thumbnail is by Flowell, and it looks I like this one. It's got a very nice dual tone of colors with the pink on the right and then the cyan color on the left. Those two colors go very well together. It's got a lot of grain to it, which has a nice texture that's very consistent across it. And this player, I'm pretty sure, is made intentionally to look much larger than I see over here on the left, which gives it a kind of cool effect. Okay, now we have one by Ponky. Okay, so the first thing I noticed about this is the scene itself is very cool, but the composition doesn't work very well, because you have all the action is happening on the very top and then on the very right, and there's a lot of empty dead space over here in the middle and on the left bottom side. So to improve this, if you went from a much lower angle, then that would eliminate a lot of this floor space, and it'd be much more cinematic looking up at those players, and then they could also be larger, and you would have a more balanced portion of sky to ground. Normally you want it to be like mostly sky, like 80 to 90% sky, and then only like 20, 10%, maybe 5% ground at the bottom, typically. This player also, because you like read from left to right, I would recommend putting, if you have a player in the foreground like this, I'd recommend putting them on the left side, because you're more likely to see them first, and then that will direct you to the people that are chasing them on the right side. I think this is a montage thumbnail by Parrot, and this is kind of similar to the other montage thumbnail that we had before that was with a very vanilla screenshot. So if you're going with a vanilla style, just focus on the details, make sure that the colors are good. Don't use never use drop shadows in combination with glow like this, because they kind of like do the opposite of each other, and they clash with each other. And yeah, the composition though is pretty good, and I think if you had a good shadow here for the player, I think it would match with the background okay. Now we have a thumbnail by the Cod. Now this, I think, looks like the idea is that you have the Bedwars shop villager, and they are rich with all these items. So, first of all, I think you want to make sure that the shop villager is in the shop itself. So you could just take a screenshot of the villager in its shop and then edit that to make it look better. Because again, this render of the shop villager is front on, which you want to avoid, and it also doesn't match with this perspective of the background. For the item inventory, you want to make it look a bit 3D, not just flat like this, especially because it's so large. You could just crop a small portion of it and just show a few items that would probably look better. But if you do want to show the whole window, just make it larger, give it a bit of perspective, a shadow, make it look more 3D. And then the text itself, it's okay. I think this kind of adds something to the text rich, but you want to definitely use a different text style, a different fonts. Just look at other thumbnails like this, and use a similar style of text. This is a thumbnail or banner, I guess you could say, by Mei Li, and this is kind of styled after a banner I made for Clock's work. And I like what they did here is they added this purple along with the cyan color. The lightning effects are a bit aimless, like they don't really go or point towards anything in particular. So they could be like emitted from the sword or go towards the sword. But the colors and light in itself looks pretty cool. Background's a bit flat. You could add a bit more depth to it with like gradients and making like the edges darker and making the center brighter. This is a thumbnail by Alpha Returns, and it looks like one of those review thumbnails where you have a rating of a particular game mode or something. And it looks pretty good. I think the composition's good. I like the colors on the player. The pose is kind of unique and cool. It is using the 3D layer skins, which always looks nice. I don't have much to add here, except this arm, because the comment's also wide, it kind of blends in. You could add a shadow. I hate using drop shadows normally, but I think a shadow here might help make that comment look like it's behind the player. Also, the background, most people won't notice this, but it doesn't look like it aligns with the perspective of the player, because the player is so low in the scene. You could just crop. What I do oftentimes is I just crop the background to make it line up better like that. So you just want to make sure it's above the horizon. So you like crop it to this level, and that would just make the details look a bit better. This looks like a pack thumbnail by Voyinpin BF, Biopin BFX, and this is kind of similar to a pink pack thumbnail I made a long time ago. I will say everything's a bit saturated, especially the sky in the background, and it's also quite flat. So you probably want to add a bit of gradient to the sky, make it a bit less saturated. And because the lighting is quite warm or white, a white warmish color, definitely add some kind of bloom or gradient to the sky to match that. This is a thumbnail by Wolf, and it just looks like 2 players fighting, so it's pretty generic. It's not clear what the title is based on the thumbnail itself. Just looking at the general layout of things, the perspective on the player is a bit too strong. It doesn't match the background, and also the angle is much, it needs to be much lower to fit in with this background. And this thumbnail or banner made by Blue is actually the one on our server currently. He made this for our winter contest. I'm actually going to give more detailed thoughts on this in the video for that contest, but this is it's really, really cool. The render itself is extremely detailed. I love the layout of everything, where he's kind of like holding the camera, and it's like a selfie of the whole room. It looks very, very nice. This thumbnail is by It's Progger, and he always has very nice lights on his thumbnails. I like the kind of glow and ambience it has to it. You can see that you've got the foreground here, and then there's this kind of like frosted glass, kind of blurred glow effect on the background. And then you have a lot of inner glow on the player itself. The main thing I noticed is that the drop shadow on this mask doesn't really fit with the rest of the scene, because one, the color of the shadow, I would give the shadow a bit of color, like a blue, dark blue, or something to make it match the lighting more. And then also, it makes it look like the mask is very close to his face when, based on the position of his hand, it looks a bit further away. And you could just blur it more to make it look a bit softer. But overall, really, really nice. This looks like a very scary thumbnail by Jet. And really, there's 2 players here. There's a large player in front of this, like standing over this small player. But the main problem here is that you can barely see the small player, especially when it's on the YouTube homepage. It'll be very small to see. So you want to make that player in the foreground stand out a lot more. And usually you do that by making the player in the background much darker and the one in the foreground much brighter. You can add this stronger inner glow on them too. And don't just use red for your light. Use a lighter color. And for your darker reds, don't just use a darker color of red, but hue shift it to a cooler color to give it more depth to that color and make it look more realistic. And then, as well as making the background darker, you can just add glow behind the player. You can either make the background bright around the player and the player dark to make it stand out, or we can make the player bright and the background dark. Just something to give it contrast. This thumbnail is by Wizzy, and the main thing I noticed with Wizzy's thumbnails is it has these like artifacts of it looks like he's cut it out from a green screen. So those are just details, I guess, you could focus on. Just cleaning up those. And then with the composition, everything's a bit too far to the left. There's too much empty space on the right, so you can shift it towards the right. Also, the perspective is a bit too high on the players. You need to go from a lower angle to match with the background. And also alternating the direction of the arms and legs, like we mentioned before, on the player. And then the shadows, they're a bit too stretched. They should be a bit more circular if they're from this angle. But I like the shading colors on the background. If you're going to blur the background, just make sure you also blur in the clouds here, because they're even further away. And this is a very interesting thumbnail by my #1 fan. I got bored of making actual thumbnails. Okay. This thumbnail is by CLEXE, and it looks like it's for a glitch of an item, or a tool. So again here, you want to separate your overlays you use on the background from the overlays you use on the subject or the foreground. So, because otherwise it kind of blends them together and doesn't allow you to develop a differential and contrast between the foreground and the background. And also using the background is just a flat black color here with what looks like a lowered opacity of the overlay. So you want to use a blend mode, and you want to use gradients and colors to bring out that atmosphere more. And then the lighten, and you've done a bit of lighting on this staff or whatever this item is here, so that's good. You've got this line highlight, but yeah, you can just like enhance the shading by making one side brighter. And then the text is blurred. In this case, I don't really think that makes sense. You could make it look like a glitched kind of effect, give it a glitched effect to it. This is a live thumbnail by, I don't know how to say that name, but it's simple. It's a simple layout. You have the player here. It looks like it's low quality and being cut out from a green screen again. But the colors actually go pretty well with the background. The main thing is that the player doesn't really stand out as much because the background is so vibrant and bright and light, and the player is also light. So you could you'd probably want to make the sky on the background a darker blue color. That would make the player stand out more, and then also give them inner glow and highlights and things. And you can also zoom in on the background so that it's above the horizon line, because you're kind of above the waist height of the player, depending on your angle. Okay, this thumbnail is by Postcard MC. I don't know exactly what the video is about here. It looks like some kind of maybe overlay review, get smooth gameplay. But it's pretty empty with the background and just being the player and the sky. I would just say if you want to go with a simple style like this, again, focus on the details. Probably show fewer clouds, zoom in a bit on the sky. If you're doing a light like this, it looks like it's a bit too warm, and it might not be using a blend mode like add. So make it larger so that it is around more of the scene. You can add additional gradients and lights to make it look more natural. This is a 1v1 thumbnail by Ash. So what I noticed initially is that particularly the left side is very saturated. And you have red. It looks like it's a red. He's got a red shirt on a pink background. So red and pink kind of clash with each other, especially when they're both so saturated. So you might just want to make the background red, or if you're going to use pink, you just gotta give some kind of differential between the color of the background and the color of the player. The cutouts here could be improved a little bit, so it just wasn't it was a bit more cleaner on the edges. And then you have a lot of overlays going on over here, but some of them don't blend very well. Like it looks like these are clouds or something, but you could do more to integrate them with the rest of the scene to make it look more natural. Now we have one by Enrico. I like the I think he got this concept from iOptics, who did a similar composition for a thumbnail. The main things I would do here is blur the clouds so that they're also blurred with the background. Only have motion blur on either you can have motion blur on the player that's fallen, if the camera's standing still, or if the camera's moving with the player, then you can have motion blur on everything else except the player. And then also the central player is a bit off center, so move them a bit to the left. And you could add a bit more manual shading here too to define those sides more. This thumbnail is by Milan, and it looks like one of those like this detective style thumbnails. The main thing here is that it's a bit dark, so I'd make the center brighter, add some kind of glow or something around that. And with the vignette, rather than just using a pure black vignette, try to add some kind of color or grain or overlay blend mode to it to just make it look a bit more natural. Okay, and the last thumbnail is by Fruit Sky, and this is another 1v1 thumbnail. Similar with before, the overlays themselves could use a lot more integration with the rest of the scene. Like these ones look like they should be on the background rather than in front of the players. And then there's fog here, but the fog's a bit strong, so you kind of lose track of my legs. The main thing I'd say with these style of thumbnails that have a lot of effects is if you're going to go with a very highly edited style, then you want to make sure you do well on the effects. So if you're not as good with adding effects like this, then try to go for a simpler style. But if you go for this highly edited style, then to make it look good, you're gonna have to do a lot more work to make these effects more convincing. And I think that's all. Thank you everyone for submitting a thumbnail. I really enjoyed getting to react to them, and I hope this helped you learn a bit about how to design good thumbnails.